When my parents died, I wasn't just grieving, I was blindsided. The will read like a stranger wrote it. Everything went to my brother. Not a single mention of me, the daughter who cared for them, paid their bills, held their hands through every hospital visit. Their excuse, women don't need to hold property, you'll be fine. But they were wrong. I wasn't fine. And what I did next made sure they'd never forget me. If you've ever felt overlooked by the people you gave everything to, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life stories where karma finds its way home. My name is Maggie. I'm 38 years old, a registered nurse, and I live in a small town outside Wichita, Kansas. To most people, I probably looked like a woman who had it all figured out. A stable job, a warm smile, the kind of daughter every parent would be proud of. But what they didn't see was everything I sacrificed behind closed doors. I was the firstborn in a modest middle-class family. My parents, Richard and Darlene, were the old-school traditional kind. My mom worked part-time at the local library, and my dad ran a hardware store he inherited from his father. Then there was Brandon, my younger brother by 6 years. From the moment he was born, it was like the entire house revolved around him. He was the golden boy, the baby, the one who could do no wrong. He never kept a job for more than a few months, always trying something new. Yet my parents bailed him out every time. They co-signed his loans, paid his rent, and called it support. Me, I never asked for anything. I worked my way through nursing school, pulling double shifts at the hospital, sometimes sleeping in my car to save on gas. When Dad had his first heart attack, it was me who took unpaid leave to care for him. When Mom's arthritis got worse, it was me who drove her to every appointment, bathed her, cleaned the house, made her meals. Brandon, he showed up late to birthdays and left early from holidays. Still, they called him our baby. I never resented them, at least not at first. I just thought love meant putting others first. I believed that one day they'd see the difference, that all the quiet ways I showed up would count for something. And in the rare quiet moments, Mom would squeeze my hand and say, "You're our rock, Maggie. We'd fall apart without you." I clung to those moments. I never married, never had kids. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was always needed. I told myself it was noble, that I was strong, that Brandon just needed more time to grow up. But time passed. He got older, and instead of growing up, he got worse. He'd call me in the middle of the night asking for money. He once told our parents that I was too strict with him, and they actually apologized to him. Still, I kept showing up. On birthdays, on hospital nights, on every holiday, I didn't even feel like celebrating. Because that's what good daughters do, right? I thought loyalty would eventually be rewarded. I thought my parents, even with all their blind spots, would be fair when it really mattered. But life and death had other plans. It started with the phone call no one ever wants to receive. Dad had collapsed in the backyard while fixing the fence. A stroke, massive. By the time I got to the hospital, he was already on a ventilator. Mom stood by the bed, trembling, her hands gripping the railing like she was trying to hold on to both him and herself. Brandon. He showed up 2 hours later, hungover and yawning, like he'd just rolled out of bed. "I didn't think it was that serious," he mumbled. Dad passed 2 days later, quiet, peaceful. And just like that, the man I had spent years caring for was gone. 3 weeks later, Mom followed. Some say it was grief. I say it was something deeper, regret maybe. She'd been fading slowly since Dad's death, and in the end, her heart just gave up. I planned both funerals, picked the hymns, wrote the obituaries, held myself together because someone had to. Brandon gave a shaky eulogy about family meaning everything, while I stood in the back clutching a tissue and trying not to scream. He hadn't even been around for their final days. But sure, family meant everything. After the service, the family lawyer pulled me aside. "There's something we need to go over," he said, his tone low. "The will." I expected it to be straightforward. Split evenly, maybe, or even slightly more to Brandon Fine. But when I walked into that office, everything I thought I knew shattered. He opened the folder, cleared his throat, and began. "Upon our passing, all assets, including the house, land, vehicles, and savings accounts, will be transferred in full to our son, Brandon Thomas Hargrove. Our daughter, Margaret Ann Hargrove, is to receive no inheritance." I blinked. "No inheritance?" I asked, thinking I must have misheard. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. "That's what's written. It was signed 6 months ago." 6 months ago. That was around the time Mom was in and out of the hospital, and I was managing her medications, driving her to every appointment. I stood there, frozen. Was this real? All those years. All that care? And I didn't even get mentioned. I asked if there was some mistake. Maybe a second version, an addendum. He shook his head. "I asked them twice if they wanted to include anything for you. They said no." I walked out of the office numb. I don't even remember driving home. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it. I called Brandon. He answered on speakerphone, laughing, with someone in the background. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we talk about the will?" He paused. "Oh, yeah. Kinda wild, huh?" I swallowed. "Did you know about it?" "Of course. They told me months ago." I felt the blood drain from my face. "And you didn't think to say anything?" He laughed. "Look, Maggie, you're doing fine. You've got a job, you don't need this stuff. Mom and Dad just thought I'd use it better." Better, I wanted to scream. I had poured my soul into taking care of them. While he partied, I changed IV bags and cleaned bedpans. "You know what Mom said," he added. "She said Maggie's strong. She doesn't need to be taken care of." Then he hung up. Days later, I went to the house, our family home, to collect some personal items. A photo album, an old quilt my grandma made. Brandon was already there with a realtor. Boxes lined the hallway. "You shouldn't be here," he said, smug. "The house is mine now. You've got no claim." "I just want a few things," I whispered. He folded his arms. "You want something? Ask my lawyer." I stared at him, stunned. This wasn't just a sibling being selfish. This was cruelty. The boy who used to beg me to tie his shoes was now kicking me out of the only home I'd ever known. He slammed the door behind me. That night, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not just from grief, but betrayal. Not just from loss, but erasure. My parents didn't just forget me. They chose to write me out. And in that moment, something in me cracked. Not in a way that made me weak. In a way that made me dangerous. I didn't just lose my parents. I lost the illusion that love guarantees fairness. After being kicked out of the family home, I had nowhere to go but a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It smelled like mildew and regret. The floor creaked with every step, and the heater barely worked. I was still working night shifts at the hospital, pulling 12 to 16 hours a day, barely sleeping. I ate ramen and dollar store cereal. My body hurt. My heart hurt worse. But I kept going. Because that's what I was taught to do. Keep going. Until one night I collapsed. Right there in the hospital break room. A coworker found me passed out next to the vending machine. Turns out I was severely dehydrated, running on caffeine and stress. The ER doctor looked me in the eye and said, "You need to slow down. You're burning out." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because what choice did I have? I didn't have parents to lean on. I didn't have a spouse or kids. I didn't even have a damn chair that didn't wobble. Meanwhile, Brandon was posting photos on social media of his new car, a luxury sedan, something flashy and red, with the caption, "Work hard, play harder." Work hard! He hadn't worked a day in his life that didn't involve cashing in on someone else's efforts. He sold the house 2 weeks after the funeral, got nearly $300,000 for it. And what did he do with the money? Started some kind of wellness tech company that had no office, no clients, and no product. Within months, he was throwing lavish parties, sipping champagne in rented Airbnbs, talking nonsense about manifesting abundance. It made me sick. One night, I got a message from a childhood friend. "Hey Maggie, I saw Brandon bragging online. I don't want to pry, but did your parents really leave everything to him?" I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain being erased by the people you loved most? A few weeks later, I saw Brandon at a gas station. He didn't notice me at first. I had my hoodie up, no makeup, just trying to survive another day. He strutted inside with his sunglasses on, talking loudly on his phone about some big investment deal. When he walked out, he caught sight of me. His smile faded for half a second, then returned smug. "Hey, sis," he said. "You look tired." I stared at him. "How's the business?" He shrugged. "It's booming. I'm a visionary, you know." Then he added, "You could have been part of it, you know, but you're too busy playing the victim." That was the moment. The moment I stopped grieving and started planning. I went home that night and opened the old file cabinet I'd brought with me from the house. Inside, among the old tax returns and medical receipts, I found something strange, a draft of an older will, dated 3 years prior. In that version, the estate had been split equally, half to me, half to Brandon. My name had been there, clear, undeniable. I stared at the page like it was a lifeline, and then I remembered something. 6 months before my parents died, right around the time that will had been replaced, Brandon had been around a lot more, helping with paperwork, driving Mom to the bank, insisting he knew someone who could help them update their documents. I had chalked it up to maturity. Maybe he was finally stepping up. But now, it reeked of manipulation. And something about Mom's behavior during those months started to make more sense, how she seemed unsure, anxious, even tearful when I mentioned the future. She wasn't just getting old. She was being pressured. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the apartment floor, heart racing. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about dignity. It was about finally standing up after being pushed down my entire life. I pulled out my laptop and started researching estate fraud, undue influence, and contested wills. Every article I read made my blood boil and my resolve sharpen. Brandon had taken everything. But what he didn't realize was that I still had myself, and I was done playing the role of the forgotten daughter. They say rock bottom teaches you lessons the mountaintop never could. Well, I was attending every class. In the weeks that followed, I buried myself in research and legal documents. I discovered more than I ever thought possible about estate law witness signatures, coercion, and manipulation. But I wasn't a lawyer, so I did the smart thing. I took what I had copies of the older will, my notes, timelines, and a dozen printed screenshots of Brandon's arrogant posts and brought them to a local attorney named Grace Underwood. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, and didn't blink once during my story. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "You might have a case, especially if we can prove undue influence and tampering with the original will." My hands were shaking. "You think I can fight this?" She nodded. "You can, but it won't be easy. Your brother is counting on your silence." That was the moment I knew. Silence was the luxury I could no longer afford. But while Grace prepared the legal side, I did something else. Something that wasn't about money. I recorded a podcast episode. Just me, sitting in my tiny kitchen phone, propped up by a salt shaker. I titled it, "What Happens When Your Family Chooses Someone Else." I didn't mention names. I didn't slander or accuse. I just told the truth from my heart. I talked about what it's like to care for aging parents for years only to be cast aside, what it feels like to give everything and be left with nothing, and how betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people who kissed you goodnight as a child. I posted it and went to bed not expecting much. The next morning, my inbox was flooded. Messages from nurses, caregivers, daughters, sons, people like me. Strangers writing things like, "I cried listening to your story." I thought I was the only one. In the episode, it got shared. A lot. That first podcast turned into a weekly series, Caregivers Confessions. Each episode, I opened a vein, and people listened. Brandon, of course, caught wind of it. He sent me a cease and desist email through some shady attorney friend claiming I was defaming him. I forwarded it to Grace. She laughed. That's the move of someone who's scared you're being heard. Meanwhile, his business started falling apart. The investors he'd bragged about vanished. Turns out, vibes and vision boards weren't enough to run a company. But his ego wouldn't let him stop. He took out loans, rented office space, started filming fake promotional videos with actors pretending to be employees. It was all smoke and mirrors, and then came the deposition. Grace subpoenaed all versions of the will, including digital files from the notary. We found a suspicious date discrepancy. One file had been created after my mother's stroke, when she could barely sign her name, let alone understand a legal document. Another witness listed as having been present during the signing swore under oath she was never in that room. Piece by piece, the truth came out. One night, I got a call from Grace. "Maggie," she said, "Brandon's lawyer just offered to settle." I froze. What does that mean? They want to avoid court. Full disclosure, it means we have leverage. They're scared. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not cruel. Not vengeful. Just finally seen. But I didn't accept the offer. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about a payout. It was about accountability. So, we pressed forward. Brandon was forced to show up in court, hair unkempt, suit, wrinkled, looking nothing like the social media mogul he pretended to be. And when the judge read the preliminary findings, Brandon's jaw clenched. Fraud, manipulation, undue influence. The court froze the estate. Brandon stormed out of the courtroom, muttering that I'd ruined his life. I didn't reply. He didn't understand this wasn't revenge. This was justice. That night, I walked home under the stars, breathing in the cool Kansas air. For the first time in years, my shoulders felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had stopped apologizing for wanting fairness, for daring to believe I mattered. Some people seek revenge to destroy. I sought it to rebuild. Once the court froze Brandon's access to the estate, things began to unravel for him quickly. His accounts were audited, his business license flagged. Turns out, karma has a long memory and a sharp bite. He tried to play the victim on social media, posted a video where he cried, claiming my sister is trying to steal everything from me, even though I took care of our parents. Except, he forgot something. The internet remembers, and people had been following my podcast. They knew the real story. Within hours, his comment section was flooded. Is this the same Brandon who kicked his sister out after the funeral? Didn't you spend inheritance money on a spiritual retreat in Bali while she worked night shifts in the ER? He tried to delete comments, but it was too late. His carefully crafted image shattered. While his empire crumbled, I kept building. The podcast continued to grow. Sponsors reached out. Health magazines asked to interview me. Suddenly, Caregivers' Confessions was being shared on national forums and even featured on a daytime TV segment. But the highlight, a woman named Deborah, head of a local nonprofit health alliance, reached out. We love your message. Would you consider opening a small community center? We'll help with the permits and some of the funding. It took me a moment to answer, because I knew exactly where I wanted to build it. The house. Our family house. The one Brandon tried to erase me from. At the final court hearing with all evidence laid bare, the judge ruled in my favor. The original will, where I was equally named, was reinstated. Brandon's version was declared void due to coercion and fraud. Brandon slumped forward defeated. He was ordered to repay over $60,000 to the estate, which he had already squandered. Later, his car was repossessed. He moved into a tiny studio apartment across town where no one asked him for selfies or investment tips anymore. Meanwhile, I bought the house, not as a place to live, but as a mission. I renovated it not into a luxury home, but into a wellness and caregiver support center. The front room became a quiet meditation space. The kitchen was remodeled into a tea and conversation corner. Upstairs, I turned old bedrooms into spaces for free grief counseling and support groups. On the front porch, I put up a hand-carved sign that read, "The Open Door." At our opening event, dozens of people came, nurses' daughters, caring for Alzheimer's parents, widows looking for community. Some of them recognized me. Others just hugged me, crying, saying, "Thank you for making this space. We needed this." I didn't need validation, but I won't lie, it felt good. Not because I'd won the lawsuit or exposed Brandon, but because I'd turned pain into purpose. One afternoon, Brandon showed up, unannounced. He stood outside the gate in an old hoodie, looking like a ghost of himself. "I came to see it," he mumbled. I walked outside and stood on the porch. We hadn't spoken since the ruling. "You did all this?" he asked, eyes scanning the warm yellow walls, the garden benches, the soft hum of people talking inside. I nodded. "I did." He looked down. "You know, I was just angry. I thought I deserved it more. I thought you'd be fine, no matter what." I looked him dead in the eye. "You didn't think of me at all. You just wanted to win." He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "Do you hate me?" I paused. No, but I don't trust you, and I don't owe you anything, not forgiveness, not understanding. What I owe is to the people who walk through that door. He nodded slowly, then walked away, and I watched him go, not with vengeance, but with closure. Sometimes karma isn't loud. Sometimes it's a quiet room filled with healing in the very place someone tried to erase you from. The sun was setting behind the old oak tree in the front yard, the one Dad used to hang tire swings from. Now, fairy lights glowed between its branches, casting soft shadows over the garden path. Inside the center, laughter floated through the rooms. Women sharing tea. A young man helping an elderly visitor with her walker. Someone softly playing piano in the background. It felt like a home. Maybe not the one I grew up in, but the one I rebuilt with love, grit, and truth. I walked through the hallway and paused by a photo I had hung near the entry. It was Mom and me taken just a few months before her stroke. She was smiling wide, holding my hand at a fall festival, leaves swirling around us. And next to it, another photo. This one of the house, as it once was, back when Dad trimmed the hedges every Saturday and Mom waved at neighbors from the porch. A reminder of the good that came before the storm. For a long time, I thought forgiveness meant pretending nothing happened. But now, I know it means acknowledging the pain, honoring the truth, and choosing to move forward with intention. Brandon still lives in the same city. We don't speak. I wish him healing, but from a distance. As I stepped out onto the porch that night, a young girl who'd been attending grief sessions ran up to me. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "This place saved my mom." She smiles again now. Thank you. I blinked back tears, bent down, and smiled. No, sweetheart, thank you. You reminded me why I kept fighting.